Hello, Runette. My name is Meg.
Hi, my name is Runette Gabriel.
Thank you for speaking with us today.
You're welcome, certainly.
Tell me about where you call home.
Well, I call Reading, Spring Township, my home now, but I came to Reading in 1968 from a little town called Newmanstown, which is up for 422 off on 419. And we have one stoplight in the town. I graduated from Newmanstown High. At that time, every little town had their high school. Richland, Schaeferstown, Myerstown, and Newmanstown. But now it is a jointure, and it's Elko, Eastern Lebanon County High School. You don't really need to know what year it was that I graduated. No, I graduated in 1952, and it's a small town, and actually in the area there were two major families, the Johnsons and the Whites. My maiden name is White. And we had quite an experience. It's a Pennsylvania Dutch town, and in high school, well, actually, I went to indicate how small my high school was, or how small the town was. I went to first grade in the same building and graduated in 12th grade in the same building. We did not have separate buildings for elementary and junior high, etc. And I was the only African American in my class. And as I said, there were two major families, the Johnsons and the Whites. It was quite an experience. It was quite an experience. And I will say this, that I had more positive experiences than negative ones, but there were some negative ones. My family, of course, were religious. My uncle was a minister, an AME minister. And I had two cousins who became bishops in the AME church. So, and we were also, let me hasten to say, we were very musical. There was my father and my aunt sang in a gospel quartet, and they traveled all around, even Dauphin County, Berks County, all over. And this was, they were quite well known as the Sheridan Jubilee Singers. I don't know if I should go on or if you have something specific that you want to know.
Sure. Well, what's your instrument of choice?
In terms of whether you want to ask me questions or
yeah,
what?
just curious. Did you also sing?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I was going to say that in terms of religion and going to church, I think I spent most of my life in church. You know, there was always early dawn service. I'm smiling because I'm thinking of, I'm remembering some of those, getting up and having to go to church, have a service. And then there was Wednesday night prayer meetings. Wednesday night was prayer meeting. And then in the summertime, there was Bible school. So that's why I say that I spent a lot of my time in church. Music is very important to me. And as a matter of fact, that is why or how I got to be a member of the choir at Christ Episcopal Church. In September of 1973, they had there was an advertisement for a soprano soloist, and of course I auditioned, and the person that heard me was he is a wonderful organist. I don't know if you're familiar with the name Bruce Bankston. He had been at Christ Church as the organist and choir director. And I'm still, believe it or not, I'm still in the choir. Of course, we haven't had the rehearsals as we usually do due to COVID, but we're the person who is the director right now is Jim Wilson. But I'm still singing, and I've been there for it's over 40 years. And one of these days, I'm going to have to realize that maybe I have done what I should. I guess I'm saying that one of these days I'm going to have to give it up. But I love music, and it's part of my background. My father was an excellent tenor, and my aunt, excellent contralto. Yeah. I mentioned, let me explain for a minute. I mentioned the fact that of my aunt. You'll hear me talk about my Aunt Lucia, because she came to live with us after my mother died, and my mother died when I was 5 years old. So she was a great influence on my life. She was a disciplinarian, but yet with love. It wasn't unusual for her to, let me say, put her foot down. There were certain things that were allowed and certain things that were not allowed. Let me just share, and I might be digressing a little bit, but there is a commercial on television today where the family is sitting at the table eating, and the mother says something like, you can't leave the table until you finish your whatever. And the little girl says, now listen to this, the little girl says, that's all right, we'll sleep here. I thought, my God, if I would have ever said anything like that to my Aunt Lucia, oh my God. Oh, it's just, I would have never done that. I mean, you never took your attitude, if you felt it, but you better not say it. And I think of her with a lot of fond memories. I really do, even the ones where I was disciplined. Let's see.
How many years did she live with your family?
She lived with us until, my mother died in 1931, and then she came to live with us. She lived with us for, let me see now. I was like a teenager, and then she got married and, of course, lived in her own home in Newmanstown. Several years till I was a teenager, and I was like 5 when, so I would say 11, 12 years. She died in 1961. I came, I'll go back if I can sort of go back.
Sure.
I told you I came to Reading in 1968, and that was because I worked as a nurse at Wernersville State Hospital. And Rabbi Weitzman, he died about 3 or 4 years ago. Time goes so fast. But anyway, he came to visit the Jewish clientele at Wernersville. And he walked past the volunteer coordinator's office, and we introduced ourselves and we spoke a little bit. And he said at that time, he said, we are looking for an executive director of the Berks County Mental Health Association. And he said, are you interested? And I said, well, not really, because I liked my work, and I felt comfortable, you know, I liked my work. That was bottom line. But I said to him, oh, well, what is the starting salary? Can you imagine? I asked him, and he said, well, we'll start you at such and such a number. And I thought, oh my God, I'll be rich. So I did go for the interview and I got the job. So in 68, and I think it was November the 4th, 1968, I started as executive director of Berks County Mental Health Association. And prior to that, they had not had, I was the first African American that became the executive director. But I don't know whether the pay between working at the state hospital and the nurses at Reading Hospital was different. The state paid a little more, and with what I was offered, I thought, wow, I'll be rich. But that I didn't become rich, but I thought it was worth it to change locations. And then I, of course, moved to Reading. I used to commute for a little while, but it was kind of strenuous because it was not really an 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 job, because there were things that happened after 5 o'clock, and various meetings that were like at 7 o'clock and what have you. So I moved to Reading in 68.
Okay. And what brought you to, so you tried out for the choir at the Episcopal Church. Is that when you joined the Episcopal Church?
Maybe a year or so later.
Okay.
It was in 1973 that I tried out and got the job. And then I think about a year later, I liked the liturgy, and I also knew and worked on a committee in Lebanon County with the rector there at that time. His name was Charles Sutton. And I knew him, and I also liked the liturgy. And I thought, well, you know, it's church, and I enjoyed the choir. I enjoyed being in the choir. So that's when I joined. So I would say a year or two, and then I joined.
Okay. Was the style of music different in the Episcopal Church versus the AME Church?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. It was a little more, Christ Episcopal was a little more classical and a lot different in the AME Church, in that we did more of the basic hymns, and also the rhythm. There were a lot of upbeat music in the AME church, and a lot of improvising. You know, it wasn't as strict in terms of let's say the rhythm. We did a lot of things within the meter, you know, or within the context of the meter of the music, but we might change it a little bit. It may not be exact. We were not concerned as much in the AME church with being right on the beat. The concern was showing and expressing your praise of God. And I found the same thing at Christ Episcopal, but it was in a more classical way, a more structured way. And yet, there were times when Bruce accompanied me on something, and he was right with me. You know what I mean? It was great. It was great as I look back. Those were good times. And I still enjoy singing in the choir. And the people at Christ Episcopal are it's a wonderful family. It really is. They're caring and helpful. And just recently, there are some members that have been extremely helpful to me in the past couple years. I've had some health problems, and they have been here only coming to the door to hand me food or do something or bring me something due to COVID. But it's a good church. It's a wonderful church, and I call Father John Francis Papa John. And when I'm speaking sometimes to people, I'm sure they are surprised that I would say Papa John, but he understands it, and we get along fine. As a matter of fact, I act as a receptionist 2 days a week at Christ Episcopal now. Of course, there's hardly anyone there. There's no one there except Papa John and I, and he is probably on the phone on Zoom or something, having a meeting, or he will be going out. So essentially, I'm there alone for that period, those 2 days, which I can take a book and fill out some forms and what have you.
Yeah. Were there any other stories or things you wanted to share with me about your family?
No, I mentioned we were musical. We went to church. I told you about that. I sometimes questioned, and of course, no one's around now to answer all these questions that I have about my past. Sometimes I think about where I landed up, where we landed up. For example, my parents were from Greenville, South Carolina. And my father came north because of work. and other things, but he got a job at the E.J. Levino. It was like a steel foundry, and of course the pay, I guess, at that time was worth it, and that's where he worked for a while. And then in the summertime, he was my dad was an excellent cook and baker. As a matter of fact, he worked at Bindenwood, which I don't know if you're familiar, used to be a very nice resort. People from New York would come down, and all over actually. And he assisted this chef there, and on many occasions was this chef there. So that's one thing about my family. My dad was an excellent cook. And I have a neighbor now across the street who is also a very good cook, and which every time he does a new recipe or something different, I'm the guinea pig, which I don't mind at all because it's always been very good. I'll tell George that I mentioned his name. I didn't mention his last name because I think he would, I don't know, he would probably smile ultimately, I think. Oh dear. Oh, I did want to tell you that one of the people that I admire, and of course she's gone now, Harriet Tubman. And I have played Harriet Tubman or portrayed her life in various organizations around, Berks County and Lebanon County. I thought, and I still think that it's amazing what she did in going back and forth from the South and taking people with her. And it's amazing because she learned from her father about nature, the North Star and water, and they followed the water on many occasions in her trip to Philadelphia, the first time she ran away. Her first trip, she was by herself. She did not have anybody with her. And her ability to escape the slave hunters, there was a bounty on her head, and yet she was able to make several trips. It's just amazing. But she too was very religious. She was a nurse at one time, a spy for the Union Army, and they called her Mother Moses. That's because she led so many people to freedom. And incidentally, she died in March of 1913, which is the day that Rosa Parks was born. That's just an interesting thing.
Yeah.
And of course, Booker T. Washington had her eulogy. And she was active in other things too, other than the Underground Railroad. For example, she worked with Susan B. Anthony and was concerned about women's suffrage, as you know. Her connection, especially with the Underground Railroad, was with very, very active people who were against slavery, and I was thinking of one of the individuals who was financially supportive, as well as providing a safe house. The Friends, or the Quakers, were very, very influential in the Underground Railroad and helping Harriet. She was not a well-educated person in terms of going to school. And there's one account that I recall, which is kind of humorous, and yet it's interesting. And that was, this was when she was working as a spy for the Union Army. And somehow she was on a train going somewhere. And a slave owner came into the area where she was on this train. And she thought, oh my goodness, she recognized that who he was or what his purpose was, why he was there. They were looking for people who had run away. And she didn't know what to do. But there happened to be a magazine laying beside her on the seat. So she picked up the magazine and held it up as if she were reading it. And apparently it was enough of a disguise so that he went past her. And when he did, she said, "Oh, God, thank you," because she didn't know whether the magazine was upside down or not, because she couldn't read. So it is humorous, and yet it shows how quick she could think, in terms of what to do. It was later recorded that she did learn to read. There's not too much on it, but I did read that later on she did learn to read. So someone so dedicated to freedom and the welfare of others, I think deserves a place, a very important place in our history, which leads me to the thought that in high school, in history class, we never had a lot of characters or a lot of people. We never talked about a lot of people that were African American. The only person that I can, and it's interesting, the only person that I can remember that we talked about, mentioned, was Dred Scott. You remember the Dred Scott case? He had traveled to a state that was free, and yet the owner could come and get him and take him back. And I don't know, that has stayed with me, Dred Scott, and that's the only character or person that I can think of that we at least mentioned in history class. Later on, I guess, George Washington Carver and some other people came up, but Crispus Attucks, he wasn't mentioned in my history classes or in my history books. It was, and I think that is so unfortunate. You know, maybe we'd have a different attitude if that were not the case. Have I gone on long enough?
No, I have some more questions for you.
Oh, okay.
Well, this segues nicely into, do you wish that things would change politically and socially right now? What would you change right now?
Oh,
Lots of things, I'm sure.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, you know, everything. No, I think that it is so unfortunate that people don't take the time to get to know people, to understand, and are not tolerant and respectful of other people's cultures and ideas. I think it's such a shame that we cannot seem to reach a state of peace and harmony. You know, it's just, there's so many things. It's hard. It's hard. I don't have the answer, because you cannot legislate kindness, respect, compassion, love. You can't, you know, there are no laws that say you have to do it. That has to come from within you. That has to be part of your personality. It has to be part of your being. We have made some progress. We have made some progress in terms of reaching out, indicating that all lives matter. You know, but it's difficult, although I am still hopeful. I really am, in spite of everything, But it's, we're living in a very difficult time. And then, of course, COVID has not made it any easier. You know, it's tough, but I think we can do it. I think if we can do it, we have to have faith. We have to have the hope. I guess it was Jesse Jackson that said, "Keep hope alive." We have to keep that alive. One of the things that I wanted to tell you, and I'm going back, I don't know how you're going to edit this.
We'll figure it out.
My first experience, I told you that I was the only person, African-American person in my class. My first experience, which will stay with me. I mean, it's been here a long time. We had I think it was 5th or 6th grade, maybe 6th grade. We had penmanship. We used to have classes on penmanship and, you know, the cursive kind of thing. And the teacher, whose name I shall not say, she's gone, but I know her name very well. Anyway, she had a system where if you wrote it was a Palmer method of writing. If you wrote your paper and it was okay, she would take it and put it on the board. You know, that was a gesture, a recognition, and an indication that you know, did very well. Well, at the time, the one day, the superintendent of schools, and he had responsibility to visit. We didn't have a superintendent at Yeomanstown. He was responsible for several of the schools in Lebanon County. And of course, he came to Newmanstown this day. And it happened to be penmanship class. And he stood over in back of me and looked over my shoulder, and I was writing my paper or doing the assignment, whatever it was. And after he stood there for a while, he went up to Miss Kale and said something to her. And it's interesting now, you can take what you want or decide, but it's interesting that after he spoke to her, my paper appeared on the board every time. And to this day, even as being as old as I am, my penmanship is excellent. It's really something. I am sure that he said to her that it seemed to be very, very nice. Before that, there was always something wrong with it. But after he came and spoke with her, my exhibit was exhibited with the other people. And I just think that he must have said something to her. Well, I'm sure he said something to her because he went from my desk up to her and talked to her. And then after that, I was on the board every time. Of course, now they're not doing cursive a lot. I don't know if they're still teaching cursive.
Yeah, they do in our school district just 1 year.
Oh,
so it's kind of like, if you don't pick it up right away, forget it. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Well, what's your definition of happiness?
Being at peace with your neighbor and being at peace with yourself. Probably yourself first and then your neighbor. And having friends and family that will support you and love you. That's happiness.
That's great.
That's part of it anyway.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Runette. It was lovely to chat with you.
You're welcome, I'm sure.
You were great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Salam.